Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this Trials at Home webinar. Today, we're discussing our request for proposal and how you can submit your technology for review to participate. My name is Dwayne Schultes. I'm the Managing Director of Vital Transformation, and I'm also the co-lead of Work Package Code, and we very much appreciate your participation today. So today, in answering the RFP, we have several presenters from Trials at Home, and I'm pleased first to introduce Mida Zutkist from University Medical Center Utrecht, who's the project co-lead. Good afternoon, Mida. How are you?
Good afternoon. Hi, Dwayne. I'm well.
Thank you. We'll also have Kai Langle, who's a clinical trials director from Janssen Clinical Innovation. He will be discussing the nuts and bolts of the RFP. Kai, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having us, Dwayne.
Always a pleasure, Kai. Kai will be assisted by Stein Henke from FH Joningen, the University of Applied Sciences in Graz, Austria. Stein, thank you very much for your participation today, sir. Stein appears to be muted, but we assume he's there.
Happy to be here.
Hello, Stein. Thank you very much for your participation. We'll also be joined by Gary Friedman from Pfizer, and he'll be discussing the project's IMP management of the solicitation process. Gary, thank you for your participation, sir.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, Gary. And finally, we'll also hear from Cinzia Molendini from the UK Medical Research Network, and she'll be discussing the telemedicine requirements and the needs around telemedicine. Cinzia, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us, Dwayne.
It's our pleasure. So to begin and to kick things off, we're going to hear from Mida about the project overall and what we're looking for. And Mira, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks. So yes, welcome everyone also from me to our Trials at Home webinar today. So I'll give you really a very brief introduction into the project, after which I'll hand over to my tech colleagues. So the first slide is on why we started the Trials at Home project. Well, we started it because clinical trials are, and they will remain, extremely important to generate evidence on efficacy and the safety of medicines. But we all know that the conventional site-based ways of performing these trials, a lot of them have become challenging on many levels. And remote decentralized clinical trial approaches, in which we really center the trial around the patient by use of technologies, have the potential to overcome many of these challenges. And the COVID crisis urgently stressed the need for these approaches. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So what do we intend to do within Trials at Home, or what are we already working on? Well, we look at RDCT approaches from several angles. So Work Package 1 BEST is really looking at what has been done regarding RDCT approaches, what worked, what did not work. Then Work Package Tech, which you will be hearing more about today, is really looking into what's possible from a technological perspective. Work Package 4 EAGLE is looking into what's allowed from a regulatory and ethical perspective. Work Package 5 looks into what stakeholders are actually looking for in this area. And then all these learnings will come together in the Pan-European pilot study, which is being prepared by Work Package 3. And if you can go to the next slide again. So in this Pan-European pilot study, what we intend to look at is whether RDCTs can replace the existing paradigm for clinical trials. And the way we intend to do that is in the next slides. This is the way we want to set up the pilot study. So there will be a site-based part, study part A, which is more the conventional part where patients come in through sites, they're randomized to conventional or hybrid arm by the investigator at the site. And then on the other side, there's the decentralized part, study part B, where really all patient-related or all trial activities will be done remotely. So that will be the remote arm of the study. And we have this RFP because we're looking for certain technologies to accommodate the remote parts of this pilot study. And with that, I'd like to finalize my introduction and give it back to Dwayne.
Thank you, Mira. And I suppose the next part of this is to really discuss those technical requirements and what specifically we're looking for. So I'd like to now hand over to Kai Langle and Sten, who will discuss what the RFP is in practicalities. Kai, Sten, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. So hi there. It's good to see such a big audience early in the new year. So clearly this is of big interest to the community out there. So my name is Kai Langel. I'm the industry side tech lead in the project. Before I move on introducing the RFP, I wanted to also introduce my colleague Sten. So Sten, would you say hello?
Hi, I'm Sten. I'm the co-lead of the technical work package 2 in the project. And yeah, like we discussed now, the technical work package, of course, is responsible for selecting technologies, but also making the requirements and the criteria which we are looking for.
And I have also 2 other tech colleagues here. So Cindy and Gary both contribute in the tech work package, but you'll hear more from them in a short time. So I wanted to just start by explaining some of the work we've done in the tech work package so far. So we basically tasked the tech team to really think fresh in terms of what could be possible in terms of technologies in operationalizing these remote decentralized trials. So to some degree, we asked the teams and the experts we have to forget what they already know about how trials are done and to really start with a fresh vision, because trials at home is a rather unique opportunity for us to really rethink how these things are done. We are not backed down by the legacy systems and SOPs and things that we have to do because of our companies. This is a fresh new environment for us to really build something new from scratch and take a bit of a different approach. We have really tried to push the innovation, and especially in these COVID times, I think we have to do that to really show the way for what the clinical trials could look like in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. So that's the starting point for this. And how we did this is we early on formed these what we call building block teams. So we have a number of different building blocks, and this is really important for everybody interested in RFP to understand, is that these building block teams are kind of semi-independent teams looking at those activities in those building blocks. And they will be the ones that have basically created this vision for how that building block will be delivered in the pilot study, following this kind of fresh vision and thinking. And the RFP basically is a reflection of the shopping list that these teams have put together of the kind of things that they need to acquire through the RFP process. So all of the submissions should be aligned with this building block, this structure, because this is how things will be reviewed at our end. So when you submit an idea, a proposal, your cost line items and things like this, you need to clearly identify which building block you are talking to, because that will be then reviewed by that specific team. So you can see all of the different building blocks on this slide here. But if you go to the next slide, there's a bit more detail here, probably too much detail for me to cover in any great detail, but just so that you know, each of the building blocks contain a number of different study activities inside them. But we have basically grouped items and activities in the study that are quite closely related to each other in the same building block. And then that's how these building block teams can deliver a bit more of a holistic vision for those activities that belong to their building block, because quite often these activities are very closely linked to each other, often using the same systems, the same people, the same workflows, and things like that. So that's how we can bring together a bit more of a seamless workflow for different stakeholders. The different building blocks, of course, also need to be integrated with each other. So for this purpose, we have a different team that will look across these different building blocks and look at the integration points and look for those synergies where these building block teams need to work with each other to make sure that the full trial, this entire technology package, makes sense. And not just the technologies, but also the services. So I think for the truly unified, seamless experience, we need to integrate not only the technology, but also the services around them, the people who actually use the technologies. So home health nurses, for example, the PI, the patients, they all have to kind of operate in a seamless fashion using this technology package. The other thing that's really important for everybody to understand is that we already have a bit of a foundation in place for this technology package, and that is coming from one of the internal partners in the consortium already. So that is the ClinPal system delivered by eClinical Health, and you can go to clinpal.com and find out a bit more about that system. But it does provide a lot of the core capabilities for this underlying technology package. So there is a workflow engine as part of the ClinPal system. It has APIs that you can integrate to. It provides single sign-on capabilities. It has an EDC data capture system and some of those sort of core functions. The full technology package will then consist of the ClinPal foundation and these additional technologies that we will source through the RFP. And that is then the technology package that will operationalize all of these building blocks, all of these activities, and so on. So that's sort of the high level, big picture. So keep in mind, we have the building blocks, we have the different activities, and then we have the ClinPal system as the foundation. So this is just important background for everybody to understand as you think about how your particle technologies or services can fit into this picture. So just keep those two key things in mind as you prepare your submissions to us. So that's really in a nutshell what I wanted to share with you. Sten, anything else that you would like to add there?
Yeah, I think you summed all these things good up. I think from technical side is important, the modularity you said, because we need to achieve here a seamless integration of all the components of the basis solution we have already and the solutions which are selected through the call. And here, of course, we need to look not only on functional requirements, but also technical requirements to allow this integration. And I think this is, from technical side, one of the key points we will also look here beside the functional requirements, which of course are requested from the experts.
Yeah, great. Okay, so it's a really great project. The successful companies will get to work with these building block teams. It's going to be a fantastic challenge for us to build this package, get it all operationalized, up and running, ready for first patient in for our pilot. So good luck to everybody who's interested in submitting their ideas and solutions to us. Looking forward to seeing what those look like. And I guess that's it from me for the time being. So back to you, Dwayne.
Yeah, thank you, Kai. And just again, to clarify, when you talk about the current functionality platform that people can look at, that's at ClinPal, that's CLINPAL.com. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's spelled out here on the left side of the slide if anybody has any questions about that. So that's great. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Sten. I'd like to now pass over to Gary, who is going to discuss the IMP management side of this project. And Gary, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Gary is bringing up his slides. And just to let you know, Gary, you're also muted. So if you could unmute yourself, that would be very helpful. You're still muted, Gary, if you could unmute yourself. Not working, Gary? Okay. I tell you what, why don't you continue to sort of sort out things on your end? We'll continue to press on. So we'll move over to Cynthia now. Cynthia, if you wouldn't mind, please, if you could go through the telemedicine overview, that'd be very helpful. The floor is yours, Cynthia. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Jane. No problem at all. So this is just an overview of a high-level vision that we have developed in the intervention and follow-up basic building block, which summarizes what we hope it could happen when we start visiting patients and we get into the active part of the pilot study. So this high-level vision has been also as a reference, has been acting as a reference point for also the other basic building block for to think about the technology that we are looking for. And it's just an overview to give some context. And our vision is that we would ideally like a single platform that would facilitate the interaction and the experience between the virtual side or the physical side and the patients. This digital platform would allow to track, for example, IMP shipments or compliance management, would facilitate the workflow and communication and patient case management. And of course, especially in the remote arms, but we expect some elements of this platform would be applicable also into the hybrid arm, telemedicine plays a central role because it allows, of course, visits to happen at home and also visits that could normally happen at the physical site. If you go to the next slide, Duane, please. So we have listed here the high level, again, requirements. We understand, of course, that there is more complexity, but we'll evaluate depending on the response we receive in the RFP and how they adapt to CleanPal and the pilot design. We, of course, require this application to be to integrate with CleanPal. As Stan and Kai mentioned before, we are looking at the modularity of the system. We need high quality audiovisual interactions, especially when multi-user interactions are required. So ideally, we would like the possibility to connect more than 2 stakeholders and parties, maybe invite a GP or a home nurse or another healthcare professional or a caregiver into the conversation. So to make sure that everyone that needs to be involved in a visit is involved at the right time with the right level of access. We would like to have an efficient scheduling solution, both for protocol defined visits, but also scheduled visits, for example, retest if we need, or repetition of some assessment, or also for emergency visits and contact. We would love to have the visibility of the participant or the home nurse or the site personnel availability and schedule to facilitate and make the users more independent and autonomous to book their visit or reschedule their visit. It's important to have a user feedback mechanism after each visit, so this feedback can be quantified and evaluated to make improvement or upgrades as required depending on the user response. We would like this application to be able to connect to external devices, for example, cameras for if visual inspections are required, or also to be able to share documents and images during the visit. And we are looking also to some recording or transcriptions capabilities. I put optional here because we are aware this might depend on local regulation and consent from the parties involved. But ideally, we would like to have this functionality so we can keep track of the information that are exchanged during the visit, or even use this information for ECRF completion. Or anyway, we would like to have the ability to take notes during the visit for the same purposes. So this is the high-level list of telemedicine requirements, and I'll give back the conversation to you, Duane. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. So again, that's the end of our presentations here. Let me just go back to Gary. How are we doing, Gary? Are we back in live now?
We have solved the technology challenge.
That's great, Gary. So please, the floor is yours again. If you would like to just present the IMP side, that'd be great.
Very good. Let me try and share, and just let me know when my screen has popped up.
Okay, looks good, Gary. Seems we're okay.
Very good. Okay, and while we're waiting for this to accept the command to go to full screen, really want to thank you again for this opportunity to present some of the more granular aspects here. As Mira, Kai, and Cinzia have already laid out the overarching structure here, one of the things we know from our prior experience within each individual pharma, there's a lot of granularity that is necessary to work out prior to undertaking one of these types of trials. And that is really one of the incredibly valuable aspects of this entire trials at home collaboration. It really knits together people who've had experience and have that foundational understanding of where the gaps can appear. And in our discussion with you today regarding IMP deliverables, this is just one of those extremely granular areas that your full capabilities will be necessary and will be tested to ensure that we really have all the pieces in place. And the good news is in 2021, this year we'll be integrating all of these technological pieces that everybody has been introducing. So without further ado, as it relates to investigational medical product, again, in this situation, we're going to be working with something that will require cold chain and very careful management. So from the moment of randomization all the way through to the initial IMP ordering and delivery, and then to IMP supply, resupply, accountability, and destruction. Each of these aspects, we're going to show you a little bit of what we're looking for here in this RFP. And then we'll hit on some of the issues that may be, we've already, from prior experience, we've already noted to be areas we want to highlight. So from the moment, from whether it is a voice or a written randomization process, it'll be done electronically. But from that moment that the IMP determination has been made into which arm the participant is going to be randomized, all of the unique identifiers, whether it be their RAN number and their single subject identification number, each of these must from that moment follow through all the way, from the moment of the first shipment all the way through to destruction of that IMP. And the goal here really is to ensure that, as with any traditional clinical trial, that IMP management and accountability and destruction are handled in a compliant fashion so that everything is truly done in accordance with all EMA regulation, and that everything is done so that we are inspection ready starting from day one. All of the pieces that you see listed out here, we're not going to go into tremendous detail right now about them. However, we do want you to begin to be thinking about, in your responses to the RFP, each of these unique aspects. So you have your capabilities in terms of how drug ordering logistics can and should be done. You understand that from our perspective, each of the pieces of data related to IMP will ultimately need to be stored within electronic source and within our trial master file. And there needs to be that stable linkage of all of these ID numbers, as we mentioned before, that relate to the investigator, the study participant, all the way through the central courier and the central pharmacy that will be involved. This linkage will be needed to be preserved. So when you look at how these services will be provided, whether there will be a central pharmacy and a central courier, as many steps as can be brought together so that everything is already integratable and integrated, that will help to avoid gaps that we would potentially discover during the integration process toward the latter part of 2021. So as IMP moves from the point of transit all the way to delivery to the participant's home, each of these step-by-step aspects, the more granularity you can provide, that will be extremely, extremely useful to us as an entity to help to judge each applicant's submission. As you're well aware, and as we mentioned before, again, IMP, the initial supply, and then the resupplies and even unplanned supplies. So there are always surprises. So just as I had the technical glitch earlier where I couldn't switch over to unmute, we always encounter within decentralized trials, there's always a greater risk of a glitch. There's always a risk of a gap being discovered. So each of these aspects that you see listed here under resupply, unplanned supply, IMP return, and accountability, each of those steps, we will need to ensure that everything is fully accounted for so that when the IMP closeout does occur, when that accounting does occur, there are no gaps from an EMA inspection point of view. Some of the interesting challenges that we have already addressed and will be discussing with you in greater detail following receipt of your proposals. The concepts of the central pharmacy, the decentralized investigational site, the central courier, Each of these, the linkages between them will need to be unimpeachable. They need to be absolutely airtight. There is always the possibility that IMP will have some aspect of tainting or some quality issue. So the detection and the communication of that quality issue so that IMP can be replaced. And then obviously in all trials, there is lost or even stolen IMP. Each of these unique aspects present unique challenges in the remote decentralized clinical trial. I appreciate this opportunity to communicate some of these most granular steps. They may not sound fascinating, but we know that in your expertise, you know the importance of them. Dwayne, thanks so much for this opportunity. Dwayne, I think you're still muted.
Thank you very much. So as we were discussing, Gary, thank you very much. We do now will take questions from our audience. We do have quite a few questions. So for the last half hour or so, we have 34 minutes now. So we'll be taking questions from the audience. We did have a few questions in advance that have come through. And so firstly, I'd like to look at a question we received regarding patient interfacing technologies. Are the following types of patient interfacing technologies within scope of the RFP? Blood glucose testing, continuous blood glucose monitoring, insulin injections, other wearables, and measurement devices. Is that the type of technology we're looking for? Who would like to attack that question?
Happy to take it, Dwayne.
Thank you.
So the short answer is yes. A lot of those things that you mentioned are in scope. And you can find the more specific scope in the RFP text. So you have to go inside the building blocks to see what they are calling for. But like smart medication, the IMP will be an injectable. So those things are called for in that. So you have to go through the detail to see what the list includes. But it does include the patient-facing things. And there might be more things added to the list as the pilot finalizes its protocol. That work isn't complete yet. So we are not excluding that we wouldn't be adding things to the list, but many of those things are already included.
That's great. Any other comment from anyone else? No. Sten, any comment?
No, I think, yeah, yes is the answer. And I think the building blocks, it's in several building blocks actually. The one is the data processing, data capturing building block. And also in Cynthia's building block, I think we have these elements for engaging with the patients.
That's great. We've had a few questions here about the actual structure of the RFP when people respond. Is it expected to slice the answer per BBB profile, so IG setup and design, and provide as many proposals as BBB profiles would like to participate? In other words, do you need to segment this by the BBBs, or do you do one sort of universal answer? What sort of format are you looking for?
Well, the key thing is that we need to be able to understand what parts of your proposal belong to what building block. So you can do that in one big document and cover everything in one, or you can break it down into multiple documents, one per building block if you prefer. We need to be able to have the right people review the right content. It's up to you to decide how to best facilitate that. But please make sure that everything that you provide, you label it with the right building blocks so that facilitates our review.
Great. Now, we've also had a question around the type of solutions provided. Obviously, we've discussed the clinpal.com where some of the functionality is already included, but the question here is, we understand you have already selected a few technology solutions. Can you please share more information on these solutions? Are there handout sheets aside from this website? What other interfaces do we have to get people the information?
Well, the key thing is that everything that ClinPal doesn't do that we need is either in this RFP or in some other place. So again, ClinPal covers a lot of the functionality that we will need, but there's many gaps, and those gaps basically are the RFP. So you can go to the ClinPal website and see what they do by default, and then you can look at the RFP, and then you can do the math to see what's there. I think that's the short answer to that.
And then we have a question here about the template, the service agreement template. Yes, go ahead, guys.
Mira, you want to add something?
Yeah, so maybe just to add to that is that, and some of the operational aspects of clinical trials that remain operational as they always are, they're also already covered by some of the other partners. So really everything that we're looking for indeed regarding technology is very well outlined within the RFP information, and everything that's not there is covered. Except for what Kai already mentioned, that some of the elements of the pilot study are still under development. And so some minor elements might still be added to the RFP, but that would really only be minor things.
Fine, thank you. There's a question here around the service agreement template. Do people need to provide their comments by the 15th of January? And is there a Word document of the template available? Quite a technical question here. No comments?
Yes, so I think, no, it's indeed quite a technical question. And yes, if there's comments on that, I would provide them ASAP, because that could lead to some discussion still. And I think we need to take the practical aspect on how they do that back to the group and word that on the website.
Fine, thank you. Some questions here that have come in during the webinar. We have 22 questions. We'll do our best to get through them. Are you giving extra points, or are you giving any weighting if people address more than one BBB? So if they're going after potentially more than one area, is this seen as a benefit, or does it matter?
I would say yes. We don't want to deal with the 1,000-piece puzzle if we can avoid it. So if you can cover more, if your system does more than one thing, then please highlight that. I would think that it would be seen as a benefit by the team. So yes, we want to reduce the complexity.
Yeah, and Kai, just to echo that, whether we're talking about IMP or we're talking about some of the way that telemedicine visits are performed, conducted, and the way that data are looked at, the more integratable everything is, the better it will be. We want to make sure that the data flow are proper and that they're executable.
And maybe to add just one more point, but it needs to be clear if you for several pieces of the puzzle, so to say, what is it really that your company offers itself and what is offered through a third party, again, because that's something we would need to know.
Great. There's a question here, Kai, about your very big technical slide with all of your various broken down bits and pieces. It says, in the detailed tech package slide, are those detailed components outlined things not provided by ClinPal? So are those basically the deliverables that we're looking for, or are those just the clinical areas?
So what I showed you is the full end-to-end trial activity model, that as we call it, that has all of the activities, whether they're not provided by ClinPal or not. ClinPal does support many of those activities. And again, what is left to be covered is mostly included in the RFP. But what you saw on the slide is the kind of full picture of everything. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. And again, we've had several questions here about, yes, we will provide a video, and we will be circulating this out to the general public. So if you want to expand your screen 500 times and read everything, you will be able to see the detail of what is in there. We have a question here. Thanks so much for the overview. My question is there a list or definition of the things that are missing specifically on the ClinPal platform? In addition, solutions need to provide for the full solution you are looking for. Thank you. So do we have like a wish list of what we'd like to fill in the gaps, or is it really up to the people who are applying to make that determination?
So it's basically the RFP content where we describe the gaps that we have currently. So there's more than ClinPal that we have, because we have also an internal CRO partner, basically, and other partners like MRN that will be providing the home health nursing services and things like that. So the sort of underlying foundation is mostly ClinPal, but there's some other pieces as well. And the gaps are basically described mostly in the RFP. So it's best really just to look at the RFP content, and that is the description of what we still need.
Yeah. I might underline this, what has been said, because I think it's very important, because if you look at the RFPs in the call, you might think, okay, there are some activities which are not requested here, but I think they are important for this building block. These mostly are the activities we willingly excluded from the call because we have them covered. So coming back to these full slides of Kai, this one slide, this is like Kai said, the complete end-to-end solution, but it's really important that you only submit to the things which are mentioned in this document in the call for the building block, because only these things we will evaluate and all the other things we will immediately exclude them because we have solutions for these.
Yeah, and maybe one more thing to add is that there are some items that we included where we are not yet 100% sure whether we actually want them. So we want to see what's available and what's possible and how much these things cost and how operationally feasible it is. And then we'll determine later whether or not to include that. So even if something is included in the RFP, it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll actually end up doing that part. There's a couple of items like that in there, but feel free to pitch to anything that you see in the RFP. We'll seriously consider everything that's there. But at the end of the day, we have to come up with a package that we actually can operationalize, that fits into the constraints that we have and so on.
I'd like to bring Cindy in. She's been rather sitting there quietly in the corner. Cindy, is there a preference for EU companies over non-EU companies? I mean, do we really see this as an EU-driven project?
Yes, I think the priority is probably given to European companies, but I think that's we can accept RFP, we can accept responses for others, but definitely there's more interest from the European companies.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that very quickly. It also has to do with the funding model of the project. So given that this is money from the IMI, it means that we have to evaluate European-based countries first, but definitely if there's a much better solution out there somewhere else, yes, we're allowed to consider that, incorporate that into the pilot study.
Thank you. It appears that prior clinical trial experience is required for the IMP supply in intervention following up the building blocks. Is this also a requirement for the ops and coordination, telehealth, and patient engagement blocks? So how much prior experience are we looking for? Gary first, let me go to you first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Dwayne. A great question. And we know that having solutions that are off the shelf are always going to be preferable because developing over a 1-year period in preparation for a first subject first visit in second quarter of 2022, we know that there is a lot of work that would need to be done to create things from scratch. So certainly prior experience, off-the-shelf products can be prioritized. I hope that kind of clarifies. So if you do have prior experience, that is exquisitely valuable and you should emphasize that.
That's great. Thank you. Any other comments on that from anyone? Nope. Okay, we have a few pretty clear questions here from Bart Stevens. When is the first patient in date? What's our goal?
So the goal right now, according to our timelines, is right around April 1st of 2022. 2021 is going to be the bringing in all the providers and then integrating, finding the gaps, solving them in advance of first subject first visit.
Thank you. And Mida, we have Bart, it's a multi-part question here. Which pharma companies are involved in the trial? So who's involved in trials at home right now? Who are the main sponsors?
Well, there's over 15 pharma companies involved, and they're all listed on the website. So maybe it's better to have a quick look there than for me to name all of them. But we're an over 31 partner consortium, with half of them being FPI partners. So we're really, really a diverse group with a lot of experience in RDCTs.
And again, are we targeting a phase 1, 2, 3, or 4? Obviously, probably not 4, but are we looking at a 1, 2, or 3? What is our goal here?
4. The product is already on the market.
4 products already on the market. All right.
Yeah.
So that was great. Thank you. Let's see here. What sort of size trial are we looking for? So how big and how many centers?
Yeah, so maybe I can take this as I'm also co-lead for work package pilots. So the funny thing about this project is that we're developing a pilot study at the same time as we are developing the technical package for it. So we don't have everything set in stone yet, but what we are currently looking at is a study we are aiming at performing it in about 10 European countries with an overall sample size of 1,000 patients involved, adults, non-vulnerable subjects. And these main assumptions on the pilot study are also in the RFP documentation, in the general documentation right at the bottom of that document.
That's great. Any other comments from anyone? No. We have a question here that's quite interesting. It's, do you expect the partners or the providers to have all of the BBBs managed internally, or can they subcontract out to other suppliers? So do you want them all in-house, or can they come in with partners, subcontract? That's an interesting question. Who would like to go ahead, Kai,
I think we would be open to your suggestions. Ideally, we would like to keep the management quite simple. So if there are some things, if you can pre-assemble the puzzle to some degree before you come to us, then I think that could help reduce the complexity. So I think we would be open to looking at those suggestions. That's my view, but happy to take comments from others.
Just to add, as was mentioned earlier, a CRO, Julius Clinical, has already been contracted internally, and they do have a complete suite of SOPs, which do include vendor selection, vendor management, and vendor oversight. So as Kai was saying, you know, however your proposal is, there will be very business as usual SOPs governing how those activities will be overseen and executed. So just wanted to add that element.
Thank you. So we have another question here about budget. How much budget is available for external technology providers? How are we deciding budget criteria?
So I don't know
Kai?
how much that is actually public, but there is a sizable budget to cover these sort of technologies, and we think it's sufficient to cover all the things we ask for. But it depends on what the actual proposals will include. But we've kept that in mind as we were calling these things. But there is a sizable budget. The total budget for the entire project is about 40 million. Half of that is a contribution from FPA in terms of in-kind FTEs, resources, and things like that. And half of it is euros coming from the European Commission through IMI. And a good amount of that has been set aside to cover these technology acquisitions and also innovative services. So we've set aside a piggy bank to cover all the things that we're asking for here. So there is budget available to cover these things. I don't think you should be too worried about that.
But the budget then is negotiable. It's negotiable then based on the proposal, I suppose.
Yes, we have to kind of negotiate the entire package. So we have to see how much these different things cost and make sure that we do indeed have enough to cover all of it. And that's going to be a bit of a balancing act. So yes. So I guess that's all I can share. I don't know, Mira, if you have more to add to that.
No, yeah, I would agree with you. I think we really had a good look at the budget, and we think we can cover what we are asking for there. The budget is a combination of what needs to be done on an operational level, technologies, etc. So again, it's a puzzle in that sense. And if we want something really innovative, really expensive, that might mean that other things cannot be incorporated. But currently, we believe that we can incorporate what we are asking for. That should not be a problem. But then, yes, also companies and proposals will be compared on the budget they put in for certain technologies.
So it's not one piggy bank, it's an assorted several sizes of piggy banks up to negotiation. Fair enough. We have a question here about on the RFP regarding AI and validation of technologies. What about validating new technologies? Cynthia, what are we looking for from a validation standpoint for maybe some new toys? Oops, you're muted, sir. You're muted. Cynthia, please. Thank you.
I think in terms of it depends really on what basic building block we're looking at, and the subject matter expert in that basic building block will define. I haven't been involved specifically in the AI discussions, so I'm afraid I can answer that. I cannot answer that, but the validation will depend on the specific topic.
Sten, do you want to go ahead, please? Yes.
Yeah, sorry. So it depends on the context of use. So whether that particle technology is used in trial, meaning post-consent, then it becomes a clinical trial system. It needs to be compatible. Well, it needs to be compliant with all of the regulations, and needs to be validated according to the computer system expectations and all of that. If it's done outside of the trial, for example, as part of the recruitment, that's a bit of a different story. That's done pre-consent, so not really part of the clinical trial systems per se. So we need to understand it by case, how much kind of computer systems validation is required, if that's what the question is about. There's many different kinds of validation, so I don't know exactly what you're referring to with the question, but the validation expectations are pretty much what you would expect in any kind of normal clinical trial as well. It's not going to be very much different here. If you don't know what those regulations and expectations are, then well, you have a bit of time to look into it. But it's pretty much standard in terms of what the requirements would be for us.
Great, thank you. We have a question here regarding the central pharmacy. This will be for Gary. So is the central pharmacy a community pharmacy, a hospital pharmacy, or something else? What are we looking for, or is it even defined?
So I think that the correct answer to that, as with all good medical school questions, is D, all of the above. So there are already solutions for how to execute a decentralized trial and have a central pharmacy. So that there are multiple possibilities. We are, again, this is a creative environment. We want to ensure that whatever it is that you're proposing, that it is something that you can back up in terms of its ability to function and function correctly across all the member countries within the EU that will be participating. So it could be that it is a central pharmacy that is university-based. It could be a central pharmacy that is community-based, meaning one that exists across multiple existing EU member countries commercially, or it could be a one central depot that then sends things out to each of the individual countries. Again, this is something that the more you have a solution that is off the shelf, that will be put you at an advantage. However, we are open to creative solutions here. I hope that answered it clearly.
That's great, Gary.
And actually, Gary, that last point there was an important one, because the things that we included in this RFP are those things where we hope to see some innovation and creativity from the community out there. So that's also the reason why our visions are quite high level, leaving quite a lot of flexibility for different proposals coming from you. So if you have a particular way that you'd like to propose for how you see these pharmacies working in our context, then feel free to propose that. And we really hope to source some of these good ideas from you guys. So feel free to tap into the creative parts of your brain and let us know what you can do.
I've got just a general question here for everybody. How much of the RFP is hardwired right now, and how much flexibility are we going to need depending on what happens in the next 6 months with COVID-19? Do we anticipate any changes? I mean, obviously it's changing every day. Netherlands wasn't locked down. Now you're locked down again. Things are changing all the time. Mira, what do you reckon with regards to the scope?
Yeah, so I think with regard to the scope for the RFP, that won't change that much depending on the COVID-19 situation. If you look at the way we drafted the Pan-European pilot study, I think the one element that we can most easily continue with, whatever the circumstances, is the fully remote part, and that's what the RFP is. Technologies are for. I think we do need to look really well on the site-based part of the study, and that's going to be dependent on the COVID situation, on whether that's desirable, whether it's ethical, whether it's even feasible. So changes may happen to the pilot study, but I don't think that we will really change, that it would need to change the scope of the type of technologies we need. But I'd like to hear the others on this as well.
Sure.
keep in mind that the FPI is planned in April 2022, and I'm really, really hopeful that the great vaccines that we have seen approved will actually, change the situation quite quickly, and hopefully well before our first patient in. So hopefully COVID doesn't get too much in the way of us executing what we are planning to do.
Agreed 100%.
Fingers crossed, everybody. Fingers crossed. Could you please elaborate if experience in diabetes is favorable or mandatory? Are we looking for someone with a specialization in endocrinology diabetes?
I'll start off on that one. Certainly experience with diabetes, with technology related to diabetes monitoring remotely would be of great value, and you would want to emphasize that. However, just the innovation aspect here, as we've mentioned a couple times just recently on the call, this is really what we want to encourage. It is a dichotomous answer. Emphasize your experience, but also make sure that whatever creativity you can bring it, but understand that we have between January 2021 and about January 2022 to make sure everything exists, is validated, and is executable.
Thank you. Cindy, are we only looking for diabetes platforms, or can reverse interoperability, can we be more creative here? What are you looking for from a telemedicine standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Gary that there is, of course, closer look into previous experience with diabetes, but as long as we have an innovative approach that can be realistically feasible also in the time frame we're looking at, because let's not forget, yes, April 2022 is a bit more than a year ahead, but a year goes very fast. So we need to find the right balance, but we're not definitely rejecting, anything that is not prior diabetes validated.
That's great. Thank you. We have a question here about the data platform. Are we looking for any specific standards? FHIR, Common Data Model, Odyssey, obviously that's a big thing in the IMI right now. Are we tied to any particular data platform or not?
Well, yeah, go. You start, Sten.
Sten, yeah.
Of course, we have some standards in mind. We're in all the interfaces of all the building blocks, not only regarding the data. These will also be part of the assessment, but of course, we will look at the overall package. And I think it goes too much in detail to answer this now. Which concrete standards? We have several on the list, and then we will value the solutions coming in against each other. But of course, these points will be a point which are relevant to allow these data exchange in between different modules from different vendors, and with the base solution in particular.
Yes. Kai, anything else to add?
Well, maybe it's worth looking at the CleanPal website again, and there are some standards that they rely on, like CDISC ODM for data exchange between systems and things like that. So some of that might be helpful detail to look into. Great.
We have a question about the intervention. Is the IMP in this pilot, is it an injectable? Is it self-administered, or is it performed by nurse coordinators? There we go. So is this a home intervention, patient-driven intervention, or is it a hospital nurse-driven intervention?
It's self-administered.
Self-administered?
Sorry. Go ahead, Gary. Maybe you want to add to it.
I didn't want to. I have nothing further to add. Self-administered.
It's as they say, it's self-intervention. However, home nursing support, for example, can be available if patient needs to be trained or supported, but it's a self-injectable IMP.
Thank you. We have a question here about the process itself. If someone doesn't meet the knockout criteria, but no one else meets the criteria, in broadly, are people still in? In other words, is it kind of a flexible review, or is it really just going to be, you're going to take one person and that's it?
I think it probably depends on the case. So I think if you're not sure, I would submit and see what happens.
Thank you. There's a question here. We specialize in remote monitoring of patients safely using extraction of their medical records, which complements this model. However, you appear to not want a safety solutions. Is ClinPal capable of remote safety monitoring and extraction of data from source? So we're looking at EHR data, I suppose. What are we looking at from ClinPal regarding the actual data extraction?
So let me start with that. Sten may have some additional comments. We don't have anybody from ClinPal here on the call, but clearly the electronic data capture, that system will be provided by eClinical in terms of what can be drawn into it, whether EHR, wearables, all these other aspects. There needs to be a demonstration of, based upon what's in the RFP, if there is something that eClinical is not able to import, is not able to extract, that if that is something that you have expertise in, please make sure that you do apply and make clear what it is you're proposing to integrate that ClinPal is not able to at this time.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone on that? No. Sten, you seem like you want to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a tough question and difficult to answer without going too much in detail. But of course, I mean, there will be, as ClinPal is the base solution, they will maintain most of the data, so to say. But I think it's not excluded that we have other data platforms for post or pre-processing, especially of data. And here we need to guarantee that data can be exchanged. And some point which has maybe not mentioned so far, of course, I mean, in the next years, a key point will be to make these things interoperable from both sides. So even if you submit a solution which is very well tested on the market and stable already, there might be some adaptation integration work of interfaces, especially to make here the interoperability possible. So this you should keep in mind in when submitting your solution.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And just building on something that Sten just said. So yes, if integration can be performed, that is one option. There is also the other option that there can be importing of data and that data can be housed and mirrored appropriately and does not necessarily have to be integrated necessarily within the ClinPal system. There can be existing way stations for data, so they can exist side by side. But as Sten was saying, they have to follow the appropriate data standards as specified by EMA.
Great. Again, this is a question, I believe we answered this earlier, but is this being recorded and will it be distributed to those who cannot attend? Yes, we will. We will circulate all the material as well as the video that will be going out to the entire mailing list and will be posted on the Trials at Home website. Which countries will be involved in the trial? Do we have any targets for countries right now? What are we looking for geographically? Who would like to tackle that? Mira, do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I can take that. So no definite decisions have been made yet on which countries. But what we did say already is that we're looking at about 10 European countries, and we do want a good division across North and South, East and West, and the different types of healthcare systems. Of course, we also need to take into account what is allowed to be done in which country. So there might be some limitations there. So we're looking at technical possibilities, operational possibilities, what's allowed where, and that together should make the puzzle of which countries will eventually be involved. That's one of the next steps we're taking in the pilot design, is taking a decision on that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, we are almost out of time. We had capacity for 100 people and we filled it up today. It's amazing. Fantastic. A lot of interest in the RFP. Again, we thank you for your participation. I just want to go just finally through the panel. If there's just one final take-home message you could give to people who want to apply to the RFP and participate, what sort of message do you think we should send them? What's sort of one piece of advice you'd like to give? Cindy, I'm going to start with you. What's one piece of advice you'd like to give to people who are participating in the RFP?
Well, I would say, as probably all my colleagues have already said, that if you're unsure about something, just give it a try in a way. If you think you can match the criteria and the requirement, even if something does not completely align, and if you think that you have some interesting, innovative solutions, just submit them, because we are open-minded, although we know what we are looking for, but we are interested also to learn what we don't know yet. So we welcome any good idea, really.
Thank you. Kai, anything else to add to that?
Well, I would just recommend to study the RFP contents in great detail, because that's a result of about 15 months of work by, I don't know, about 100 people. So there's a lot of thought that's gone into that, and that's a good starting point. And then there's instructions for how to ask more questions. I know there will be many, because we got through about half of them on this call. So we'll be answering those. We'll be posting the questions and answers on the website. So stay tuned. That will be kind of an evolving, page. So yeah, good luck with to everybody.
Sten, from your perspective, please, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah. I want to underline what Cynthia also said. I mean, this is a very innovative journey here, not only for clinical trials, also for future personal health applications. And also, maybe the RFP sounds very detailed now, and we have a very clear mind on experience of your solutions and so on. I think there's a lot of room for innovation. I mean, we as the consortium need to make it possible to achieve something innovative in the next 3 years, but at the same time make sure to structure a pilot which is operable with around 1,000 patients, like we have heard, which is quite something in 10 countries. So this is what we try to achieve, to make something stable for this amount of patients, but at the same time to achieve something innovative. And so don't be afraid too much. If you have some innovative solutions, we will have a close look at it. And we are looking forward to it. Yeah.
Thank you, Sten. Gary?
I would say work well with others. This has been a process where we've all gotten to know each other across multiple pharma, multiple academic centers, and multiple supportive industries, and nobody has all the answers. So know that when you do bring your solutions, be open to others' thoughts, and be open to others' needs as they will be to you. And we really look forward to working with each and every one of you.
Mira, closing comments, please.
Yes, so no, I would advise everyone to have a look at the Trials at Home website to also get a good idea of the broader scope of the project. That will help you, I think, shape your proposal, and we're really looking forward to all the innovative proposals that you will be sending in.
Thank you very much, everybody. We will be posting this on the internet and on the Trials at Home website as promised for the panel. Thank you very much for your participation. And with that, have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.